Serious question. My husband made an offhand comment about being at work and being annoyed that women without bras or wearing thin material would come into the cooler section and have their nipples hard and poking noticeably through their shirts. This happens to me occasionally, as I prefer bralettes to padded bras. It made me super self-conscious because I just thought of it as a normal bodily function, never thought twice about it. My husband insists that men always notice and that hard nipples inherently have a sexual connotation, and he shouldn't have to look at them in public. Is this true for anyone else? It makes me sick to think of men in public thinking of me that way when it's just a bit chilly outside. Seems nuts to me, but I've never been a man. Men of Reddit, is this something you notice? Alright, clearly I was blind to an experience that is inherent to men and the way they notice things and think. I realize I have some issues with being perceived by others that I need to work on, or I could just buy pasties like many commenters suggested. Story 1. I notice them 100% of the time, and in 100% of those instances I am not offended. That's a dumb thing to be bothered with. Notice them, then move on with your life. Story 2. Indeed, we do take note, just as you might notice a man with an untucked shirt or uneven collar. It's simply a visual cue that stands out amidst the day-to-day scenery, not unlike a brightly colored car or a dog in a sweater. It catches the eye. Now, the social implications can be as varied as the individuals who cast their glances. Some might carry a momentary flicker of sexual connotation before the rational mind steps in, while others might simply make a mental note akin to spotting someone with an undone shoelace, an observation devoid of intent or judgment. Then there are circles that indeed sexualize, but that's less about the specifics and more about general attitudes towards human bodies and sexuality. In the end, acknowledging these details is inherently human, but we define ourselves by how we choose to interpret and react to them. Story 3. I always notice but wouldn't ascribe a sexual meaning to it. When I say notice, it really is notice, not fixate or stare. It's like, there are some nipples. Okay, time to move on. Story 4. Your husband is correct. We always notice. Your husband is wrong, it doesn't always have sexual connotations. That's his own personal opinion. Your husband also has an odd view on the topic that he shouldn't have to look at them. He doesn't have to look. No one is forcing him to. His actions are his responsibility and should not be dictated by what another person wears if it's easy to ignore. Story 5. We always notice. That does not necessarily mean anything. Sometimes we might notice and be a little happy. Sometimes we might notice and desperately look for something else to keep our eyes distracted. But it is not offensive by any means. That being said, it is not our business. If a woman wants to go braless, good on her. If a woman is self-conscious and wants to keep them under wraps, good on her. Any man who comments on it needs to mind his own business. Story 6. Always, your husband is right. It is seen as sexual. There are at least a couple of subreddit communities devoted solely to this sort of thing. In a sense, I think it's partly due to the more women try to hide something, the more sexual it becomes. I do disagree with the statement that he shouldn't have to see this in public. I'm sorry, but it's a free country. Men can think the darndest things, but please don't judge or get upset over what they think. Rather, consider what they do and say. Story 7. Yes, we notice. No, there is nothing abnormal about it. Certain bras and pads have nipple contours in them to make it less noticeable when they do get hard. It is not inherently sexual any more than a natural nude body. It really depends on the viewer. The only embarrassment involved should be on the people making a big deal about it in the first place. How can you have so much shame for the human body? And why is another person's body any of your business? Story 8. I'm sure women notice too. It's just kind of obvious, like if you walked around topless. It's not the norm, so it's eye-catching. Your husband has a pretty odd viewpoint, though, and is very confused. I don't think it's a big deal. Story 9. It's easy to notice. It just catches the eye. The lighter the clothing, the more obvious due to the difference in contrast from the slight shadow it creates. I very frequently notice it in movies or other media too. I think you're putting too much weight on it. As far as I've seen, men don't really think about you in a specific way. It's more like, oh, her nipples are hard. She must be cold. and then forgotten, similar to how you might think, oh, he has a mustard stain on his shirt. He must have just had lunch. Story 10. I notice it but rarely get offended. I mostly feel bad for the woman if she doesn't know. But if she's aware and decides to step out anyway, more power to her. Story 11. Always. This is not hyperbole. If your nipple can be seen, they will be seen. Does it make you sick to think that humans are attracted to other humans? That's kind of how life works. If it makes you feel better, one day, men will stop viewing you this way. Story 12. I'm quite a free the nipple renaissance man myself. The problem is they are eye magnets and you always get caught staring. Work is the worst. Who wants to be described by the younger office set as Pervy Pete from accounts? Story 13. I do remember when I was younger, it turned me on. Small breasts with nipples showing. I'm older now, and my sex drive has gone way down, but I still look. When I was young, even the wind blowing got me excited. Story 14. It is almost impossible not to notice unless doing something that really demands your full attention. I am a man, and I don't like my nipples poking out either. Simply because it sticks out, pun only slightly intended, and can be distracting to either a man or woman, even if not looking at it sexually. Of course, when I see a woman with poking nipples, it is a different type of distracting than seeing a man. I have never tried it, but there are things called nipless that I have seen for sale in the cosmetics section. Silicone sticky covers you can put over your nipples to keep them under control and still go with your preferred bralette. Story 15. I only notice when I notice, so I have no idea how often I don't notice. Maybe I notice it 100% of the time, maybe only 10%. I've never complained about it or been bothered by it, though. They're just nipples, we all have them. Why would noticing them be a problem for anyone? Story 16. Not a man, but yes, they notice. However, so do women. I never wear padded bras, can't stand them, and generally, depending on the clothing I am wearing, will use silicone guards. The guards aren't a favorite either, but I prefer them to padded bras. For me, it's a matter of two things. One, I want to be regarded at work, not my breasts. Two, I find it can diminish an outfit. I put my outfits together to look a certain way. Nipples showing just distracts from the overall aesthetic. Mind you, I am talking about work. If you are in casual situations where you don't have to pay attention to professionalism, I wouldn't worry about whether they show. Story 17. Definitely noticeable 100% of the time, but it's not inherently sexual. I always just think, she's not wearing a bra, and then I just continue on with my day. Story 18. Yes, we notice, but he should also be a grown man about it. Like it bothers him? Maybe he should ask himself why a pair of nipples makes him so insecure. Story 19. I notice, but I'd never be actively looking for it. I don't care about it in any sort of sexual way. In my brain, it hits very similar to, there's something on her shirt. Story 20. I am a girl, and I am amazed the original poster is not aware of this. Before my double mastectomy, I used to always ensure that nothing could be seen through my shirt. I cannot imagine being unaware of this for so many years. Story 21. 1. Even though I'm primarily an ass man, seeing breasts and nipples improves the experience. I know that nipples get hard when women and probably men get cold. Cold is not very sexy to me. I can admire the form as an element of beauty, but I probably wouldn't find cold coworker nipples in a cooler that hot. But I'd almost certainly look. Story 22. Whoa! Your husband insists that men always notice and that hard nipples inherently have a sexual connotation, and he shouldn't have to look at them in public. What did I just read? It sounds like your husband is the one with the problem. If he doesn't want to see them in public, then he doesn't need to look at their chest. It's that simple. I'll be damned if I ever let someone tell me when to wear a bra and when not to. Craziest thing I've heard all day. Story 23. I was playing pickleball with a young person as my partner. Her nipples were very noticeable. I couldn't help but notice them since it's just a reflex. Even though she could have been my daughter, she noticed I noticed them. I didn't apologize because I didn't want to bring any attention to it. But I felt bad and thought I needed to have a little more self-control over these reflexes. In no way is there any responsibility on her to do anything different. Story 24. I would say that both of you are victims of our culture. The way women are sexualized and the way your husband views natural bodily functions and the way you view them being viewed is a can of worms that needs to be opened and discussed. Hope you all figure it out. Story 25. I notice whenever a kind, generous lady shares them. Always appreciative and never offended. Women's nipples showing through clothing is like a man walking around with $100 bills falling out of his pockets. Story 26. It is a normal bodily function, yes, and most heterosexual men will notice. Most men are also able to have sexual thoughts without getting angry towards the object of those thoughts or insisting that women need to change how they dress to avoid those thoughts. Your husband is a weirdo. Story 27. We notice nearly every time because we are programmed to find that to be attractive. I would be more worried about your husband commenting about how it annoys him. I will guess he mentions it to you in an attempt to make you feel insecure or jealous, or he's got some repressed issues going on inside of himself. Personally, I would think that most of us love it. Story 28. We notice every single time, even without wanting to notice. It's just uncommon if you are looking at someone and there are 2 dots on their shirt, so our eyes will automatically look at it. Maybe we wouldn't be looking if every single woman had them, but it's not a big deal, like sexually. It just gets some attention. Story 29. It made me super self-conscious because I just thought of it as a normal bodily function, never thought twice about it. It is a normal body function, and that's how most people think about it. My husband insists that men always notice, and that hard nipples inherently have a sexual connotation, and he shouldn't have to look at them in public. Men are likely to notice, but that's usually all there is to it. Much like noticing someone's hairstyle. It's just a neutral observation. Hard nipples absolutely do not have a sexual connotation. It's just a thing nipples do. As for not having to look at an erect nipple in public, that's way out of line. Women are under no obligation whatsoever to please men with what they wear, nor are women under any obligation whatsoever to protect men from their own intrusive thoughts. It makes me sick to think of men in public thinking of me that way when it's just a bit chilly outside. I may be wrong, but I sincerely do believe that most men don't think poorly of women when the air is cold. Most men are good people with mostly good thoughts. Story 30. Do you notice the women walking through the frozen food section of the grocery store with their arms crossed over their chest in the summer? It's not a coincidence. Story 31. Always. We look at your asses all the time, too. We are always looking at the camel toe as well. What kind of question is this? That's the basic stuff. Evolutionarily, biologically, psychologically, and in every other way. Story 32. Unless they're wearing a very thin material shirt with no bra, not often. I don't know about the rest of the guys, but I don't go around staring at the breasts of a woman the second I see them. Story 33. Try not to be sickened by people simply noticing something. It is just something you notice, like anything else going on with a person. I do not know if you have noticed, but we have nipples too. It is really not something to lose sleep over. I get cold easily, so it happens to me often. I have had an ex give me a hard time over it, but it is not like I can control them. It is just how my body operates. I have had women come up to me and pinch them at parties, even full-on strangers, but the vast majority of people I am around do not seem to care. You can do everything possible to avoid the gaze of others, but you still exist. You are still a person. Allow yourself some wiggle room to be one and live your life. There are people out there looking to sexualize anything and everything a person does. Do not let them determine how you exist. Story 34. Every single time, this is the one male trait that we all have in common. I am not even particularly interested in women's breasts, where I don't care if a woman has big or small breasts. But this is something that is deeply embedded in our DNA regarding women's breasts. Now, most of us will look away quickly and we apologize for seeing them in the first place, but I will apologize for the inconsiderate individuals who will stare as if they have never seen them before. Story 35. Is this true for anyone else? It makes me sick to think of men in public thinking of me that way when it's just a bit chilly outside. It seems nuts to me. I think I'm a bit more shocked that you don't notice. I thought everyone notices. as I've certainly heard more women than I can count comment on other women not wearing bras. If I wore thin pants without underwear and my genitalia was noticeable, are you really suggesting no one would notice? This post is really rather confusing. Even without trying, these details are picked up on in even the most brief and casual of glances. It doesn't have to be sexualized, but it's definitely noticed just as prominent outlines, and men who don't wear underwear are noticed and obvious. Story 36. If they are hard or pierced, I will notice 100% of the time. Just like if a woman is wearing thong underwear, I notice 100% of the time. I am not aroused by either of them unless you are specifically showing them to me and I get to be involved with them. If you're a stranger, I don't care either way. Story 37. Not a man, but I notice when men's nipples are showing through their shirts. Mostly as a counterpoint if I ever hear complaints about women's nipples showing. Story 38. All the time, no big deal. That being said, your husband is super weird about it. He probably has a thing and is trying to preemptively cover it up for when you catch him staring. He can say it's because he's annoyed that he has to look at it. Story 39. Pretend it's nighttime, moonless, pitch black. Someone drives by with those high-intensity discharge headlights that basically give you laser-assisted in situ keratomelusis from a glance. It's about as obvious as that. Story 40. As a woman, I do not understand why men insist on thinking hard nipples are sexual. They get that way in response to friction or cold. Not once have I been lounging around cozy and warm and thinking naughty bedtime thoughts and felt my nipples harden. Feel free to notice it discreetly, guys, but it's not sexual on our parts, so don't be idiots about it. Story 41. I'm not offended by women's noticeable hard nipples, and it doesn't make me want to assault them. With that said, I enjoy everything I see about women out in public. Story 42. Nipples are definitely in right now. Kim Kardashian's line scheme sells a bra that has fake nipples sewn into the bra padding. So when you wear a light t-shirt over the bra, it looks like you have perky nipples all the time. Personally, it's not my style, but I have been definitely noticing it a lot more lately.